Welcome to another episode of Out of This World. Matthew Nicolantonio with Scott Sutherland, meteorologist and science writer, and today film critic as well. Maybe not film critic, but we're going to be talking about films. We're talking about some of the science in science fiction, how scientifically accurate are some of these movies, or maybe they inspired some science. So just a lot of interesting stuff. So we will not necessarily be critiquing the films films, but we'll be talking about some of the scientific,
just the science in them,
elements and properties of them. Let's start with Star Wars on your shirt, which George Lucas on record saying that Star Wars, not necessarily science fiction, more of science fantasy. So let's talk a little bit that there's not a whole lot of science in Star Wars, but maybe we'll call them science adjacent properties or something
I guess
like
so,
that.
Because hyperdrive and lightsabers and that, they don't really exist. There are some ideas about how they might exist, possibly, but they're so far into fantasy that they're not really science fiction. So at least not hard science fiction. But there is one interesting aspect to Star Wars that is hard science fiction, and that is the very first line that we see on screen for every one of the 9 movies.
Is it only 9?
Yeah.
Feels like it's...
So far, lots of TV shows and such, but a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Because if these events did occur in some galaxy far, far away, and they were, say, transmitted to us by either a historian there or something that we received these signals, they would have happened millions of years ago. Even like, say, if it was the Andromeda galaxy that their story took place in, that's 2.5 million light years away. So signals would have traveled by the speed of light, taking 2.5 million years to get here. 2.5 million years ago here was when the very first direct ancestors of humans evolved. So a very long time ago. But that's the only hard sci-fi in Star Wars.
All right. So we'll move into a few other titles that are a little bit more based in science. We're going to kind of probably go mostly chronologically here. So we'll flash back, not to a galaxy a long, long time ago, but a few decades ago, back to 1968, 2001, A Space Odyssey. A lot of good, hard sci-fi in here. So this is one that sort of passes the test of good science fiction.
And I mean, we hadn't even been to the moon at that point. And they had space planes, orbiting space stations. And we have space planes now. We have the Virgin Galactic Spaceship 1, or they might be up to Spaceship 2 now, I think. Which is a suborbital plane. It's not meant to take people up to a space station, but will take them between like New York and Sydney, Australia in 45 minutes. There's fantastical aspects to the movie, obviously, the monoliths on Earth and the moon and orbit of Jupiter, but having a spacecraft which looked fairly, probably something along the lines that we would build, traveling between here and Jupiter, taking years to make that journey, to go investigate this monolith in orbit there. So very, very excellent hard sci-fi. They use cryosleep to make that journey, to handle the problem of resources. Dave Bowman was able to survive without his space helmet on, getting from his space pod to the airlock, which is very realistic. We always have this. There's another kind of trope in sci-fi where at the moment that you hit vacuum of space, you're dead instantly, you're frozen solid, all that wouldn't actually happen. So it's very, very sticks with the science on that, rather than going with the more fantastical aspects of these events or these aspects of space. So excellent sci-fi.
All right. Next on our list, we have the film Contact from 1997. It's a search. it's a SETI search for extraterrestrial signals.
Right.
Very accurate.
Very
sort of how you've described it in our pre-production.
Yeah,
meeting.
yeah.
So tell me why it was very accurate.
So even SETI themselves said this was the most accurate portrayal of them. Using
if they say so, then
exactly.
who are we to...
using the Arecibo telescope, the Very Large Array telescope, the radio telescopes to search for these signals. I mean, Ellie Arroway listening on her headphones to the signals, that's maybe not so realistic, because these are just, static signals from space. They're not, you wouldn't actually hear anything, I think, remarkable. It would be what the computer interprets from those signals, the energy of them, the power of these signals, and their repetition. That would be more like what they would see. But otherwise, everything's very realistic about exactly how the signal was received, where it was received from, how long the signals that, because it was our signals from here traveling out into space at the speed of light, arriving at the star Vega, 25 light years away, and then something at Vega returning a signal to us with the instructions on what to do for then, taking another 25 years to get back, which is, it was the 1936 Olympics, I believe, that the signal going out, and then 50 years later, we got the return signal back. So the movie takes place, at least that portion of it, in 1986. So that was very, very accurate. How they received the signals, what it looked like on their equipment, how they responded to it, with not just being selfish and keeping it to themselves, but contacting other telescopes as the Earth rotated, so that they could pick up these signals, pick up the viewing of these signals, and continue, so that they didn't lose any of the information from them. So very, very accurate depiction of SETI.
And sticking with that, towards the end of the end of the film, with these sort of aliens appearing as somebody from her personal life, a good decision by the storytellers there. Explain why that is.
So we get freaked out by some unusual things, spiders, insects, some animals, birds even. We have this sort of xenophobia sort of baked into our brains, so that maybe we have a very difficult time to overcome, especially when a first meeting of something that was truly alien to us. So the idea was that they would appear as one of us to sort of get past that, so that a conversation could be had.
Soften the blow.
Yeah. Conversation could be had, they could exchange information and develop the relationship, and then maybe down the road, once there was more familiarity, that they would reveal themselves to us. So very realistic in that aspect too. I mean, it was written by Carl Sagan, one of the most popular astrophysicists and astronomers ever.
Maybe one of the most popular, arguably the most popular science fiction movie of all time, Armageddon from 1998. Great movie.
Very fun movie, yes.
But maybe not one of the more scientifically accurate that we're going to have on our list here today.
So that was probably Michael Bay just saying, I don't really care.
That doesn't sound like him at all.
If the science gets in the way of the story, then we're going to put the science aside, I think was his idea behind it, which is like, it was a very exciting movie, had a great plot of, take the average person and put them in space and put them in danger and so forth, instead of having all, trained astronauts doing it. So in that aspect, it was very well done as far as a movie goes, but not a lot of hard science in it.
What are maybe some of the biggest inaccuracies? You talked about the training or the size of the asteroid, or the time of the travel.
The asteroid is supposed to be the size of Texas.
Right.
It's stated very colloquially. I don't think they actually give an actual size to it. But the Ceres, which is the largest asteroid in the asteroid belt, is maybe 2/3 that size.
Okay.
Roughly that. There are no asteroids that big.
So they took a little bit of liberties.
And if there were, we would know about it. They spotted Ceres in the 1800s, I think it was. So we would know about whatever this asteroid was. We would have known about it. We would have seen it change course when the interstellar comet apparently came by and hit it. We probably would have spotted the interstellar comet, for that matter, considering it would have been a comparable size, which is maybe the size of, I don't know, Pluto's largest moon, Charon. So, I mean, yeah, we would have noticed this a lot longer than just 18 weeks or something. 18 days was the timing of when it was supposed to hit us. So, yeah, that's not so accurate. And it takes months for even a comet and a normal comet to travel between the asteroid belt and Earth.
Yeah.
So,
and let's talk about the training aspect a little bit. You mentioned, we're sending a normal person to space, sending a driller to become an astronaut. It would have been much easier to have, train an astronaut to do what was needed as opposed to vice versa.
Pretty much. Like astronauts, they're test pilots and they're military pilots, for most of their backgrounds, but they're scientists and geologists and so forth. It would most of the time, take the Artemis astronauts, for example. Mm-hmm. They are training with geologists to become geologists so that when they land on the moon, they can do the work there that's needed. They don't need to bring a geologist with them. They can take the training they already have as an astronaut and then add geology on top of that to then go forward and do the work properly. And then they'll get advice from home, if something weird comes up. But yeah, it's far easier, it seems, to train an astronaut to do this scientific work or this technical work than it would be to train your average person to become an astronaut, especially in 18 days.
So maybe not the most scientifically accurate of the bunch, but still a very good film. Was there anything else you wanted to add on Armageddon before we?
No, we're going to go to Deep Impact.
Yeah, so very similar films and released in the same year. So very interesting that it was obviously a very popular subject at the time.
Yeah, seriously.
But this one is, as mentioned, a very similar type of story, but more scientifically accurate than Armageddon.
Yeah, had a lot more science advisory aspect to it, where they actually went to physicists and astronomers and so forth to ask them about these things. Much more scientifically accurate. They tried to deflect the comet that was incoming rather than try to destroy it. It's much easier to deflect these things, much less dangerous for that matter. If you try to destroy an asteroid or a comet, enough fragments will probably be left behind that will hit the atmosphere that it could still do a lot of damage.
Right.
Especially comets. Comets are kilometers wide. I mean, there's massive blocks of ice and rock. So destroying one, very unlikely. Deflecting, on the other hand, much more useful of a technique. We've already done that with DART, with the double asteroid redirection test. So a lot more scientifically accurate for that. The actual impact on Earth, because part of the comet does hit Earth. The fact that it was mostly astronauts that went up and did the work. Mm-hmm. So much better version, at least scientifically so.
Maybe but there is something in there that really bothered you.
Our missiles have failed. The comets are still headed for Earth. And there's nothing we can do to stop them.
And that's it. They just said that didn't work.
There would be other impacts of that.
Right. But why? Why? Like, or what? You're just going to gloss over that? I mean,
why did it work?
Did you plan it? If you launched everything all at once and it just all blew up in front of the comet, I don't see that really doing much. Right? All these chaotic explosions, forcing it maybe a little bit to the left or right or whatever, it probably just would work out to still be on the same course to hit us. If you did it in a timed fashion, that's what they're looking for, where you set off one explosion, which nudges it just a little bit, set off the next one, nudges a bit more, and so forth. Maybe that would have done it better. Mm-hmm. So maybe they just didn't apply that one properly, but it was just a weird way that they glossed over it, where we failed. That's it. And it's like, wait a minute now. Okay, that's fine. The rest of the movie, very scientifically accurate. We'll let that one slide. Okay. But yeah.
Another very popular film. I can't believe this is already over 10 years ago. In 2013, Gravity. This is George Clooney and Sandra Bullock. So what are your thoughts on this one?
So there were it was very well done as far as how zero-G was depicted for them moving around in the space stations on the outside of like the Hubble telescope and so forth. The Kessler syndrome is the idea that if you have a satellite in orbit break up, it will produce all these little fragments, which then will go on and hit other satellites, which then produces more fragments, and
Right.
so on and so forth. This is a real thing, a real concern for either accidental impacts of satellites up in space or deliberate destruction of satellites in space, that they will produce this effect that may end up eventually making low Earth orbit completely cut off from us. That's the end result of that, is that it could that Kessler syndrome could become so bad that it destroys everything in low Earth orbit. Would it happen on the timeline that gravity has it on? Probably not.
And you've mentioned that the timeline of that is a little bit problematic because of some of the elements in the movie of all these different, like, you know, Hubble and the space station and all that being sort of up at the same time. It doesn't really all line up properly.
That's right, because the space shuttles were put out of commission before China launched its space station. And when I don't think the International Space Station is shown in its current state, rather than, or when the movie came out anyway.
Right.
Not when the space shuttles were retired. So the timeline is a little unusual.
So maybe we're dealing with an alternate timeline.
Probably, yeah. That's very likely, actually, which is really cool, actually, to be honest.
That's an element of science fiction.
Exactly. So and but also there were some issues maybe with the direction that the debris was going. Although that's a little there's maybe a little bit of uncertainty about that. Like, I've seen simulations where if it simulates two objects striking each other, and then once those debris fragments kind of orbit around Earth a few times, they end up on a different orbit. So that maybe that's not a real consideration. But one of them that was that all of these objects, the Hubble Space Telescope, the International Space Station, the Tiangong China's space station, these are all on different orbits. And you can't just fly from one to another
easily,
right? You can't just point yourself at one and just launch yourself off. They're all traveling at different heights, which means they're all traveling at different speeds. And the farther you get out, the slower you'd have to be. So you're actually going too fast if you start at low Earth orbit and go up to higher orbit. So it would be a lot more difficult to achieve hopping from one station to the next than they portrayed it in the movie.
All right.
But other than that, it was very accurate as far as like the insides of the stations, how the stations moved or how you moved around in them. The way physics worked for the most part. There were some ideas of like George Clooney hanging on the end of a tether that Sandra Bullock's holding on to, and he's going to let go, and she's saying, no, don't do it because he'll end up dying. But there's some idea that she could have just given it a gentle tug because they're in 0G, and he would have just floated towards them. But they had a lot of momentum sort of packed into them at that point because they were traveling very quickly. So it might have been not that easy to do. So that probably was portrayed fairly accurately in the movie, and we'll let that one go. So because it was very dramatic as well. So, but yeah, very, very good movie otherwise. Yeah.
All right. We'll move on now to Interstellar, a movie with that I confused for Gravity in one of our other episodes. I mixed the two up, but
we're okay.
Yeah. Very star-studded cast in this one. Anne Hathaway, Matthew McConaughey. Dealing with wormholes and a lot of travel and exoplanets. So a lot of stuff in this one.
There's a lot.
Give us a rundown of how accurate this one was.
How accurate? Actually, really, really well done. I mean, there are certain aspects to it, like wormholes. They are theoretical things that probably exist, but we don't know that they exist. We've never seen one. We've never encountered one. We can't generate them. That's sometimes used in sci-fi. But the concept is very sound. It's supported by all the physics, and the astrophysics. So that's very good. And the concept behind it is that it links 2 points in space that are a far, far distance apart, but it's as if you were just to step through a door. There's no travel time in between those 2 points. So them traveling from our solar system to actually what is another galaxy in the movie is really, like, the concept of it is really accurate. I mean, if you had a wormhole that could do that, that is how it would work. You would just instantly you would be here one moment, you would be in that other galaxy the next moment. And that was really well done. Would that wormhole exist? That's a bit
Yeah.
more. We'll let that one go though. But the travel from Earth to the orbit of Saturn to get to this wormhole that was there took years, which is very accurate. They used sort of a cryosleep situation where they went into hibernation, which again, yes, you probably wouldn't want to do that. Otherwise, you'd need a massive ship with all these hydroponic farms to support yourself, even though there were only like a half dozen people on the ship. So that was really well done. The effects of climate change depicted on Earth were, not the focus of the movie,
Right.
but again, still very accurate as far as what we think is going to happen. But getting into like when they get to this distant star system, there's this gigantic black hole there, Gargantua, I believe they called it, and that was actually simulated. The entire view of it was simulated by astrophysicists, led by Kip Thorne, who's very popular astrophysicist these days. And so that was very accurately done. The exoplanets in orbit of it, these are alien worlds around another star, and that black hole is an X star or an X multiple stars that merged together at one point. Having them be somehow habitable, I'm not quite sure about,
Right.
because black holes put off a lot of radiation. They don't give you a lot of light. So whether you would have,
suggest.
yeah, exactly. So whether you would actually have planets there that could support life would be maybe dubious, but
Right.
but you never know. I mean, there's so much variety we're seeing out in space and exoplanets, so maybe.
And the one other thing I wanted to touch on, the sort of the passage of time, accurate as well. So like when
Exactly.
you make this jump, it's hours for you, but might be years.
That's
for,
right.
for others. So that
And-
part in the film is accurate.
Yeah, also with the black hole itself, because the closer you get to a black hole, the stronger its gravity becomes. And gravity has an effect on time. So the closer you get to, like say you leave somebody at the edge of the black hole's gravity and then you go in, time will pass slower for you than your partner. So years might go by. So they land on one planet and they leave and go back, and years have gone by.
I've waited years. How many years? By now it must be.
It's 23 years, 4 months, 8 days.
And that's very, very accurately depicted. I mean, the closer you get to a black hole like that, the deeper you get into its gravity well, the slower time goes for you, the faster relatively time goes for everybody else.
Yeah.
And so like 200 something years had gone by for Earth, with them being around this black hole only for maybe a day or two. So yeah, very accurate for that.
The Martian.
Yeah.
Maybe of this list, perhaps the most scientifically accurate. And if you've read the book and seen the movie, the book is a little bit more accurate than the movie, as it normally is.
Yeah.
But a lot of really sound stuff.
Yes.
And in part due to the amount of research that was done ahead of time.
Yeah. Andy Weir did an incredible amount of research for this book. I mean, there's only maybe two parts that really don't jive with the science, and that the initial storm that caused Mark Watney to be stuck on Mars would never happen. You would never have winds that strong on Mars. Well, not physically affecting you that strongly on Mars. You can have winds of hundreds of kilometers an hour on the planet, but the atmosphere is only 1% of what Earth's atmospheric pressure or density is. So that would be like a light breeze.
Right.
You could have hurricane force winds on Mars, but they would be you would
Negligible.
barely feel them, right? So that probably wouldn't happen. You could have an immense dust storm that would blind them, and I mean that happened to the just a few years back when the Opportunity rover ended up ending its mission because it couldn't get power to its from its solar panels due to the fact that there was so much dust in the air. So a dust storm cutting off their communications, maybe he gets lost, that sort of thing. That might have been more realistic. It was much more dramatic for this really strong windstorm. And adjacent to that was later on in the movie, there's a breach of his habitat. The airlock blows off.
Yep.
And he patches up the hole, and you can see the hole kind of fluttering in the wind after he's already pressurized his habitat. But here on Earth, that would certainly happen, like a tent. But on Mars, it would bow out like a dome under the tons and tons of air pressure pushing on it from the inside of the habitat. So those were the only two inaccurate parts, but everything else, the stuff that he was, the equipment he used, the fact that he went and got Pathfinder and Sojourner from the nearby, their landing zone to bring back to use as communication, the fact that they used solar panels for power, the rockets, the spaceship that they took, the Ares spacecraft that carried them from Earth to Mars and back, all of that very, very scientifically accurate. The Martian environment depicted very accurately. One part he's driving along, you see these towering dust devils blowing around, and Opportunity, Curiosity, Perseverance see these, the older rovers saw them on a regular basis. Same thing with the two current ones, Curiosity and Perseverance see these not all the time, but frequently enough that they watch for them, right? So they like to capture these to show the spinning, these little spinning vortices carving up the surface of the planet. So exceptionally accurate. Yeah, very, very well done.
All right. So next time you sit down to enjoy a science fiction movie, realize it may be a little bit more fiction than science, but there's a lot that go into these. So just something to think about the next time you're enjoying a sci-fi film. All right, this is part one. We are also going to be talking about some sci-fi TV shows as well. So make sure you check out that episode also. But this has been another episode of Out of This World.
It's very pretty out here.